Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Kaf Gimel. We begin the third perek with the Mishnah, Dine Mamonot Bishlosha. This line is a repetition from the first perek. For monetary laws, we need 3 judges. Now, generally, if there's a standing court of 3 judges, then you could just go there. You show up to the court and say, I want to sue my friend here. He owes me $100. So that is one way that you can find a court of 3 judges if it's a standing court. But now we're going to introduce a different way of putting together a court called a zabla court. Ze borer lo echad veze borer lo echad u'shnehen borin lahen od echad dibre Rabbi Meir. Zabla is the Rashi Tevot of these words. Ze borer lo echad. Zabla. And so here's how it works. One litigant chooses one judge, and the other litigant chooses a second judge. And then the 2 litigants together have to agree on the 3rd judge, and that's how you get a bet din. So this would not be a standing court. It's not there all the time, but rather it's ad hoc. It's put together only for the purposes of this particular case. And as the Gemara will explain, this is a good idea to use this type of court, because if you go to a standing court, then someone could always say, oh, the court was more favorable to you, it was more favorable to me, right? You were friends with the judges on the court, or so on. But here, it's guaranteed to be fair, since I picked one of the judges, so it's someone that I know and I respect. It's not a relative, obviously, it's a qualified judge, and you pick someone that you know and you respect, and so now that evens it out, and then we will both agree on someone who's in the middle, and neither one of us will say, oh, it was too much on your side or my side, because we agreed on that 3rd person. And so, therefore, since both litigants come up with the judges themselves, so they are sure to have buy-in that this is a fair court. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Chachamim omrim shnei dayanim borin lahen od echad. Chachamim disagree just about the 3rd judge, and they say that the 2 judges pick the 3rd judge. So I pick one judge, you pick one judge, and then Rabbi Meir said the litigants pick the 3rd judge, right? We have to agree on someone that we both think is fair. But according to Chachamim, once I have a judge and you have a judge, the judges themselves can agree on the 3rd person, which makes it a little bit less connected to the litigants and a little bit more like an official court. It's still a zabla court. But it's a little bit more official. According to the Rabbi Meir, we keep all of the pulleys of power in the hands of the litigants. We're going to see that machloket continue. Ze posel dayano shel ze v'ze posel dayano shel ze. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Going to the Rabbi Meir, if I pick a judge and then you pick a judge, and let's say I don't like the judge that you picked. I have veto power over your judge, and you have veto power over my judge. וחכמים אומרים מתי בזמן שמביע עליהם ראיה שהן כרובין או פסולין, אבל אם היו כשרים או מומחים מפי בית דין, אינו יכול לפוסלן. And Chachamim disagree. This is, when can I veto your judge? Only if I have a proof that your judge is related to you. It's your father, your brother, or is pasul, is not not an honest person, is a gambler, is a thief. So I have some substantive problem with your judge. But if your judge is a kosher judge, not related to you, or an expert based on bet din, so then I have no objection to your judge. I have to have substance to my objection. So it's not across the board veto power. I have to have a real good reason why I don't think your judge is good. Which means, according to the Rabbi Meir, even without giving any particular reason, according to the Rabbi Meir, again, all the power is in the hands of the litigants. According to the Rabbi Meir, really the litigants would have to be quite amicable. We have to be friendly. And I know we're fighting with each other over who owes money, but we both really want to get to a good judgment. And so we keep a lot of the power in each other's hands. It's not going to work if I go and veto every single judge that you pick forever. Okay, then it's not going to work. Then we're going to have to go to a standing court. But as long as we're somewhat willing to compromise and say, okay, fine, that's that judge that you picked is okay with me, then it's okay. So to be me'ir again here puts more power in the hands of the litigants themselves, and Chachamim say, no, less power. For Chachamim, even the Zabla court is a little bit more like a standing court. In the standing court, you couldn't have judges that are related or are disqualified because they're criminals. So to be Chachamim is making the Zabla court a little bit more like an ad hoc court. And lastly, Ze posel aidav shel ze v'ze posel aidav shel ze divrei Rabbi Meir. According to Rabbi Meir, when you bring two witnesses against me, so I can say, no, I veto your witnesses. Those witnesses, I don't like them. I don't want them to testify. And you could do the same for my witnesses. We have to agree on each other's witnesses. Now, this is quite a difficult line, because witnesses are the basis of proof. And if I could just come and say, no, I don't like those witnesses, so how many, you have another set of witnesses? How many? What if I just disqualify all of your witnesses and I veto them? So the Gemara will discuss this. What case is this talking about? Hachamim omerim ematay bizman shemebi alehen re'ayashin kirobino pesulin avadim ayu kesherin eno yachol lefoslan. Hachamim disagree about this also. This is, when can one of the litigants disqualify the witnesses of the other? Only if he has proof that they are relatives, they're your relatives or related to each other, or they are disqualified for some other reason, like they are gamblers or thieves. However, if they are kosher witnesses and they're not related, then I cannot veto your witnesses. And so again here, he's making it more like a regular court. Now the Gemara asks, I explained the Mishnah according to its simple Peshat reading, which is what the Gemara will eventually conclude, that we're talking about a Zabla court where I choose one judge and you choose one judge. But right now, the Gemara doesn't know that the word Ehad necessarily means a judge, and its first reading of the Mishnah is to take the word Ehad as a bet din. And it says as follows, here's how the constitution of the judgment will work. I choose one betin, you choose a second betin, and then together we choose a third betin. And so now we have 3 batedinin with 9 judges all together. And now that's the Gemara asks about that. 9 judges? Who needs 9 judges? 3 is enough. We just said for a monetary case 3 is enough. So why would the Mishnah say, I choose 3, you choose 3, and then we or they themselves, according to Chachamim, choose a third betin? You have 9 judges. What is that for? And the answer is Hachika Amar Kishe ze bore lo betin ehad veze bore lo betin ehad shenehem borin lahen od ehad. What it means is that, let's say I choose one betin. I want to go betin A, and then you say no, I don't want to go to Betin A, I want to go to Betin B. We're talking about standing courts, and so now we disagree about which Betin we should go to. In that case, both of us, according to the Bimeir, both litigants, or according to Chachamim, both of those courts will choose a third one. Not that we're going to use all 9. We're only going to use the last one. But since we disagree about which betin to go to, I want to go to one, you want to go to another. So you know what we do? We choose a third one, and that is a compromise. And that way we'll go to that one. So now we ask about that. And now we ask about this answer. Let's say we're talking about a lender and a borrower. So is that true, that even a borrower can say, no, I don't like your betin? But Rabbi Elazar already taught that when we say, let's say I say I want this betin, and you say, no, I don't want that betin, I want another one. When can someone object to a betin of one of the litigants? Only if he is the lender. The lender can say, listen, I lent you money, I was nice enough to do that. And now you're going to tell me you have to go to a different court in a different city? What a pain. I'm going to have to pay expenses just of travel. It's going to be more than the whole loan is worth. So the borrower has no right to drag the lender to go to a different court. That's true. But that's only true so that the lender can refuse a court. But the borrower, he cannot refuse. The lender can force the borrower to come to the court in that city, wherever his city is. And so since the borrower cannot disagree about the court, So if this is talking about a case, this is including all monetary cases, including borrowing and lending. So then this situation cannot come up, right? If the lender says, I want to go to this bet din, and the borrower says no, the lender can tell the borrower, sorry, you have to come to the bet din that I chose. The borrower has no right to say, no, I want to come to a different bet din. And so that's a problem with this explanation of the Mishnah. כדאמר רבי יוחנן בערכאות שבסוריה שנו, החנמה בערכאות שבסוריה שנו, אבל מומחין לא. Oh, we have an answer. We can answer as Rabbi Yochanan did elsewhere, where he answered a different question, saying that we're talking about the layman's courts in Syria. In Syria, they didn't have expert courts of learned judges, rabbis, but they had Jews who were not learned, and they made courts, and they judged according to whatever they knew. And so we can use that answer here as well, that when can a borrower refuse to go to the court that the lender chose? You're right. If it was a real professional rabbinic court, then he wouldn't have no right. But if we're talking about these courts in Syria that are run by lay people, then the borrower would have a right to say, no, I don't like that bet din. I want to go to a different bet din. And that's what our Mishnah is talking about, where the lender says, I want this bet din, the borrower says, I know I want that bet din, so then they have to compromise and go to a third bet din. However, if it was expert judges, then you're right, the borrower would not be able to object. He would have to go to the court chosen by the lender. Rav Papa amar afilu tema mumchin kegon bet dina derav huna uderav chista dekamar le mi kama tarachna lach. Rav Papa says, I can give an additional answer that the Mishnah is even talking about an expert court. For example, the courts of Rav Huna and Rav Chista, which are expert courts, and they're both in the same city. Happens to be they had two very good courts in the same city. And in that case, the borrower can tell the lender, am I burdening you? They're both in the same city. They're just one is down the block. If you're talking about different cities, then that's when the law is that the borrower cannot hassle the lender to come to a different city and to have to travel. That's true. The lender can say, no, you have to come to my city, you have to come to the one that to my bet din. But if they're both in the same city, then the borrower can object. And so if the lender says, I want to go to the court of Rav Chista, and the borrower says, no, I want to go to the court of Rav Huna, that's what the Mishnah is talking about, then they choose a third court that they compromise on. Tenan, Hachamim omerim shene dayanin borin lahen od echad. V'isa kadatach kedamrinan betin batad pasle lehu azlu bareru lehu betin acharine. And now we ask another challenge about this line of reasoning. It says in the Mishnah against Rabbi Meir that according to Chachamim, in such a case where I chose one bet din, you chose a different bet din, and so now, according to Bimeir, we choose a third one. But Chachamim say the two courts that we chose, they will get together and they will choose a third bet din. Now, if you say, as you've been explaining this whole time, that ehad in the Mishnah is referring to an entire bet din, so that means that our two batei din, even after they were disqualified, still they're involved and they're choosing a third one. I already said, I don't like your bet din. And you said, you don't like my bet din. But even though we disqualified each other's courts, still they're going to get together and they're going to be the ones that choose the third court. That doesn't make any sense, right? We disqualified them. It makes more sense according to Bimeir, where we get together again and we come to a compromise and choose a third bet din. But how could the batei din that were disqualified still be involved? And furthermore, the language of the Mishnah doesn't sound like it's talking about a b'diavad situation of if I choose one court and you choose another, and you don't like my court and I don't like your court, then we choose another one. It's only b'diavad if that happens. The Mishnah is not formulated that way. The Mishnah is formulated lechatechila. Here's how you constitute a court. I choose one, you choose one. So this whole line of reasoning does not really fit with the words. Rather, the Mishnah is read simply. This is how we read the Mishnah originally according to the Peshat. When I choose one judge and you choose another judge, then we choose a third judge together. That's Rabbi Meir or Chachamim, that judges themselves choose a third one. And so, right, the two get together and they choose a third one, and then we have a full bet din. So that's a simple reading. And how is this different from a regular standing court? Why should someone choose to follow a zabla court and make an ad hoc court? They explain this in the West from Eretz Yisrael. The Bizera says that since one of the litigants chose one of the judges and the other litigant chose the other judge, and then the two of them are getting together and they're choosing a third, the judgment will emerge according to the truth because everybody has buy-in. You can't complain about those judges were corrupt, they were on your side. You choose one, I chose one, and then according to Chamim, the judges themselves, who we both trust, chose a third one. So the truth will come out and everybody will accept the verdict. And that's a very good thing. So by the way, you see that the Bizera here says explicitly Dayan Echad. So you see that in Eretz Yisrael, they assumed the Peshat reading of the Mishnah immediately. And so this was really all, I think, an exercise to go through the other possibilities of what happens in those cases if we try to choose a whole bet din. But we can't agree on the bet din. But really, this is the simple reading of the Mishnah, that this is a good idea to follow a zabla court. Now, Chachamim omerim v'chule, ne'ema b'd Rav Yehuda amar Rav kami palge. What's that the essence of the machloket between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim? Maybe they're arguing regarding the law that Rav said. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav en haedim chotmin al ashtar elaim ken yodim mi choten mimahen. Rabbi Meir let le de Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Rabbanan itlehu de Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda said name of Rav that witnesses should not sign on a document unless they know who is signing with them. Because if the person signing on it is a lowlife or not a trustworthy person, and you're putting your name right next to them, so then it looks like you're saying, I agree with this person is okay. So you should before you sign a document, you say who else is signing it, and make sure that the other witness is a valid, kosher person of integrity. That is Rav's law. Now we're applying this to judges also, that before you go and judge on a case, make sure that the other judges are upstanding people. Otherwise, you say, I'll be a judge, and one of the other judges is a lowlife. Well, that's going to reflect badly on you. And so, perhaps Rabbi Meir does not agree with this law of Rav. And that's why, according to Rabbi Meir, the third judge could be anybody who the litigants choose. And that means even if the litigants decide to choose some lowlife, well, the other judges that already were appointed, the first two that were appointed, will be, okay, whatever. Just because the third judge is a lowlife, it doesn't mean anything. You could still be a judge together with them. And Chachamim would agree with the ruling of Rav. Really, Rav is an Amora, so Rav would be agreeing with the ruling of Chachamim. But the point is that they both agree that you can't have the litigants choose the third judge, because maybe they'll choose someone who's a lowlife. And then the first two judges will say, no, we're not willing to sit with that judge. So therefore, you need certainly the buy-in of the judges. And therefore, it makes sense that the judges should be the ones to choose the third one, so that they know that they will pick someone who is an upright judge. So is that the machloket between Chachamim and Rabbi Meir, whether they agree with Rav's ruling or not? And the answer is no, not necessarily. La dekula al ma'it lehud Rav Yehuda amar Rav. Could be everybody agrees with the ruling of Rav, that when you're a witness, you should know who the other witnesses are, and when you're a judge, you should know who the other judges are. And everybody agrees that you need the consent of the first two judges. Even Rabbi Meir, who says that the litigants choose the third judge, they have to pass the name that they choose by the first two judges that were already chosen to make sure that they'll be okay with it. So everybody agrees you need the consent of the first two judges. So what's the disagreement? Only whether you need the consent of the litigants to choose the third one. Rabbi Meir says, yes, we need the consent of the litigants. So you need the litigants and the judges all to agree on the third judge that's chosen. Whereas Rabbanan sabre dat hadayanin ba'inan, dat ba'ale dinin la ba'inan. Rabbanan say that we only need the consent of the two judges already chosen. They're the ones that decide the third judge, and they don't have to agree. They don't have to go back to the litigants and ask them if they agree. That's it. It's out of their hands. The litigants have limited power. they can choose only the first two judges, and after that, it's out of their hands. The two judges pick the third, even without the consent of the litigants. Right? The consent of the litigants is not needed. Gufa. Let's go back and look at that law. Amarav Yuda Amarav En Hayadim Chotmin Al Ashtar. The law that witnesses should not sign on a document unless they know the other witnesses. Tanya Namehachi Ikach Hayu Niki Hadat Shebirushalayim Osin Lo Hayu Chotmin Al Ashtar Elaim Ken Yodin Mi Chotem Imahen Velo Hayu Yoshbin Badin Elaim Ken Yodin Mi Yosheb Imahen Velo Hayu Nichnasim Beseuda Elaim Ken Yodin Mi Mesev Imahen. There's a baraita that supports the ruling of Rav, because it says this is what the scrupulous people, those clean of thought in Yerushalayim would do. Those that wanted to be above any suspicion, they would not sign on a document unless they knew the other people signing on the document, that they were trustworthy people. They don't want to be associated with low-life people. And they would not sit in judgment as a judge unless they know who the other judges are and know that they're people of upright standing. And they would not enter into a meal together with other people unless they know who else is reclining with them in the meal, because that's also an association. And if you go and you're sitting in the meal with a bunch of lowlifes, then it rubs off on you also and it reflects on you. And so this is a good idea. It's not only the ruling of Rav, it's also a baraita. Now, ze posel dayano vechule, kol kimine de pasil dayane. We said, according to Rabbi Meir, if I don't like your judge, I can say, no, I veto your judge. We ask, is it in the power of one litigant to just say, I don't like the judge of the other one? How could that be? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ba'arikot shebesurya shanu, ava mumchin lo. Rabbi Yochanan, therefore, limits the Mishnah and says the Mishnah is only talking about the lay courts in Syria, where the judges were not expert judges. And so you can say, no, I don't like that judge. But if it's an expert judge, someone who has official stamp of approval, semicha, then I cannot, I'm the litigant, I can't just disqualify your judge. But if it's an expert hold on, it's difficult to fit Rabbi Yochanan's limitation into the words of the Mishnah of Rabbi Meir, because the continuation quotes Chachamim, and Chachamim say, when can one of the litigants disqualify the judge of the other? Only if it brings a proof that that judge is a relative or is not qualified to be a judge. However, if the other judge is a kosher judge or an expert based on Bet Din, he got authorization from a prior Bet Din to be an expert judge, then one litigant cannot disqualify that judge. So since we see that Chachamim say, if it's an expert, then he cannot be disqualified. That means that's a point of disagreement. And Rabbi Meir would say, even if it's an expert judge, still one litigant can say, I don't like your expert judge. So that goes against Rabbi Yochanan. That's a question. And the answer is Hachika Amar. Avalim hayu kesherin nasu kimumchin mipi betin ve'no yachol lefoslan. No, when Chachamim say o mumchin, what they mean is as follows: Im hayu kesherin, if it's a kosher judge, meaning he's not a gambler, he's not a low life, there's nothing in particular wrong with him, then we consider it like an expert judge, and therefore he cannot be disqualified. So everyone agrees, Rabbi Meir also, that if it's officially an expert judge, then he cannot be disqualified. Rabbi Meir and Chachamim agree with that. And Chachamim are just saying that, and if he's a kosher judge, there's no disqualification, then he has the same law as an expert judge that cannot be disqualified. And Rabbi Meir is disagreeing about that. It says, even if he's kosher, but he's not an expert judge, then he can be disqualified. Tashema amru lo l'Rabbi Meir lo kol hamenu sheposel dayan shemumche l'rabim. We challenge that answer from a baraita where Chachamim tell Rabbi Meir the power is not within one of the litigants to disqualify a judge who is an expert from the public. That means that Rabbi Meir would disagree with it. In fact, Chachamim are challenging him on that point. It means that Rabbi Meir says that one can disqualify even an expert judge. So this is a challenge to what we just said. No, you can understand this braita not as referring to an actual expert judge that was given semicha by a bet din, but rather a judge that was considered an expert by the public. In other words, the public accepted upon themselves this judge as if he were an expert. That's what Chachamim say, that a litigant cannot disqualify a judge that the public accepted upon themselves like an expert. And the Rabbi Meir does disagree about that. And they say, well, if he's just an unofficial expert that people have accepted, then one litigant can disqualify him. But if he was really an expert who got semicha, then, in fact, he would not be able to be disqualified by one of the litigants. Tanya Namehachi, you have a braita actually supports this interpretation. Leolam posel veholech ad shekabel alav betin sheumche lerabim. Diber Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says that one of the litigants can go ahead and disqualify the judges of the other person until that person chooses a betin that has been authorized as expert for the public. So if it's really an expert, then Rabbi Meir would agree that the other party cannot disqualify that betin or that judge. Now we ask, and now we challenge this based on the next part of the Mishnah, which is about witnesses. And we ask, witnesses are like expert judges. Well, they're not exactly like expert judges. Witnesses don't have to be experts about anything, right? They don't have to be particularly learned. But the point is that just like an expert judge, his authority is absolute and cannot be questioned. So to a witness, if it's really a witness that saw it and is not, invalidated by any other point, the witness, their authority stands alone because they were there and they saw it, and cannot just be disqualified because they're not authorized. A witness doesn't need any special authorization. And yet, Rabbi Meir says in the next clause that either one of the litigants can disqualify the witnesses of the other. And so, if I can disqualify your witnesses that are valid witnesses, then it would make sense that Rabbi Meir would say one can disqualify also an expert judge. These would be similar. And so if Rabbi Meir says you cannot, what is what we just said, that he cannot disqualify an expert judge, then why can one of the litigants disqualify the witness of the other? Wait, we already discussed that part of the Mishnah where Resh Lakish wondered about it, and he said, would a holy mouth, meaning the mouth of Rabbi Meir, say such a thing, that a litigant can disqualify the two valid witnesses of another? No, chas v'shalom, it's impossible that Rabbi Meir would ever say that. And therefore, in fact, according to Rabbi Meir, one litigant cannot disqualify the two witnesses of another, nor the expert judge of another. And instead, we have to read the Mishnah, instead of Eidav in plural, witnesses, Eidah, one witness. And that's what he's saying. If you try to bring one witness, then I can say, oh, I don't accept your one witness. Now we ask, Eidah lemai, what is this one witness testifying about? If the one witness is saying that I owe you $100, well, if anything about monetary things, you need two witnesses. And so the Torah already says, based on two witnesses, that's when you can extract money or whatever else he's testifying about. But with one witness, so the Torah already says that the one witness is invalid. So you don't need the other litigant to come and say, I don't accept that witness. The Torah already says it's an invalid to have one witness. If it's enough to impose a vow, that is true. According to the halacha, if you bring one witness that I owe you money, then that will prompt me that I have to make a vow. So if it's to make a vow, well, then one witness is considered credible like two. And that's according to Torah law. Torah law says if one witness says, that this is a claim, then I don't have to pay it, but I do have to make an oath that I don't owe the money, and that's considered like two, and therefore the other litigant should not be able to disqualify it. So what case are we talking about? And the answer is leolam lemamon la sericha de kabele ale kebetre. In fact, we're talking about money. And initially, I agree. You bring one witness that says I owe you $100. And I agree to it. But then I want to change my mind. I want to retract. And I want to say, no, listen, I know I said that I would accept your one witness as if it was two, but now I changed my mind. And that's what the machloket is about. Rabbi Meir says, I can change my mind. I say, I know I said I would accept your one witness as two, and that says I owe you $100, but now I retract and I disqualify your one witness. Rabbi Meir says, I can do that, I can retract, because really it's only one witness, and the Torah already said it's no good. Whereas according to Chachamim, it's true, and the Torah says one witness cannot make me pay, but I already accepted one witness. I already said I will agree and accept your one witness. Once I agreed to it, I cannot retract. So what is this teaching us? That according to Chachamim, I can retract my initial agreement to accept one witness, tenena. But then we know that already from the next Mishnah that we're going to see on the next stuff. Amar lo ne'eman alai abba, ne'eman alai abicha, ne'emanin alai shelosha ro'e bakar. Rabbi Meir omer yachol lachazor bo, v'chachamim omerim eno yachol lachazor bo. Let's say we're talking about this kind of court where I choose one and you choose one. And I say, my father is trusted to me, or your father is trusted to me. Usually, a judge can't be a relative. But let's say we agree. And says, I know you're picking your father. That's okay. You can use your father as a judge. Or if we pick 3 cattle herders that generally are not very learned, but we both agree, you know what? You want these 3 cattle herders to be the judges? I'll agree to that. If we agree to these otherwise invalid judges, the Rabbi Meir says, even though I initially agreed, I can change my mind. I'll say, listen, I know at the beginning yesterday, when you chose your father as a judge, I said, okay, but now I'm thinking about it more, I retract. It's not valid. Rabbi Meir says, I can retract. Chachamim say, once you agree to it, you can no longer retract. So we already know that this is a subject of a machloket from the next Mishnah. Why do I need this Mishnah if, in fact, as we just said, according to Resh Lakish's interpretation, that we're talking about accepting one witness, and Rabbi Meir says you can retract, even after you agreed to accept one witness, and the Chachamim say you cannot retract. So why would I need to know that in this Mishnah if I already know that this is a machloket from the next Mishnah? Regarding the next Mishnah, Rav Dimi, the son of Rav Nachman, the son of Rav Yosef, says we're giving an example of where one party accepted someone's father as one of the judges, and so it's really similar to the case of accepting one witness as 2. Here, we're accepting someone who was otherwise disqualified to be one of the judges. And we already know that there's a machloket about that. So the answer is siricha. In fact, I need this machloket and the one in the next Mishnah. Ditana abba ve'abicha ka'amre rabanan. Delama sehadar be mishum da'abba ve'abicha chazu le'alma. Because if I only had the next Mishnah regarding my father or your father, I would say in that case, the Rabbanan say that the other litigant cannot change his mind because my father or your father are valid witnesses for anybody else in the world. Their only problem is that they're related, but otherwise they're valid witnesses. And that's where the Chachamim say, since they're objectively valid witnesses for others, that's why one litigant cannot change his mind. However, in our case, where you're accepting one witness as 2, which it objectively is no good. Even if they went and were talking about someone else, one witness is never actually accepted as 2. So I might think that Chachamim would agree with Rabbi Meir that one litigant can retract, because that's a general disqualification, having only one witness. So maybe you can retract there. So that's why I need this Mishnah to teach me that. Chachamim would say, even regarding one witness as 2, which in general is not valid, even there, one of the litigants can retract even after they agreed to it initially. And if I only had this Mishnah, where the Rabbi Meir says that one can retract, even taking one witness as two. So I might say that only in this case one can retract because one witness is never good. But in the next case where it's a father, and a father objectively is a good witness, so then maybe I might have thought that Rabbi Meir would agree with Chachamim that in that case, once you agree to accept my father as a judge, then you cannot change your mind. And that's why I need the second one also to teach me that Rabbi Meir would say, even in that case, although the father is a good kosher witness elsewhere, nevertheless, you can retract even after you agreed. You can go and change your mind. So that's why I need to state this machloket, both in this case of one witness as two, and in the next case of accepting someone as a relative to be someone who is a relative to be a judge. And now we ask, all this was based on Resh Lakish saying we should understand this as one witness. But, now we reject this whole line of reasoning because since in the Resha it says Dayano, it says in singular, one judge, right? I can disqualify your judge, not judges, but one judge. And in the Sefer it says Aidav, it says plural in the Sefer. So that means it's on purpose, that you can't read Aidav, that, it was not Lav Davka. It's not being exacting in this language. You can't say that. It's being davka. It's being exacting in this language because when it wanted to say singular, it used it singular, dayano. So if in the Sefer it's saying edav, it means plural, and that means that when one of the litigants brings witnesses into court, in fact, the other side, the other litigant, according to Bimir, can disqualify even two witnesses. And so now we're back to square one. We have a challenge against Bimir. How could it be? He already said that you cannot disqualify an expert judge, so how can it be that one of the litigants can disqualify two witnesses of the other party? So now we have a second interpretation of that clause in the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Elazar bebahu ve'acher leposlan. We're talking about a case where one litigant brings two witnesses to the court against me. And then I come with a friend of mine and I testify together with him to say there's something wrong with your witnesses. So I can't just come by myself and say, I don't like your witnesses, but if I have someone else, so now we are two witnesses and we can say, there's something wrong with your witnesses. We ask about that. Kol kemineh nogea be'adutohu. Is it really in my power to, even with a friend, say your witnesses are no good? There's a conflict of interest. It's my case. I can't be a witness against your witnesses when I stand to gain by disqualifying your witnesses. That would not generally be okay. Amar Rav Acha b'red Rav Ika kegon shekara alav ad. So Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, says when we raise a substantive challenge against your witnesses, me and my friend here, we say there's something wrong. So therefore, it's something that you can look into and see if it's true or not. So we ask ad demai, what kind of challenge is it? Ilem ad de gazlanuta kol kimine nogea ba'edutohu. So what kind of challenge is it? If it's that I say that your witnesses are thieves, well then, should I be believed? No, it's a conflict of interest. So even if me and a friend, we come and say, hey, your two witnesses, we saw them stealing. But we should not, Betin should not accept my testimony because I stand to gain from it. So it can't be talking about that. Ela ad de pegam mishpacha. Rabbi Meir sabar hane amishpacha kamesahade ve'umemela kapasle. Rabbanan sabre sof sof nogea be'aduto who. Rather, it's talking about a case where me and my friend, we come and we have a challenge regarding a family flaw. We say there's something wrong. Your witnesses are from a family of Eved Kanaanim, some other problem with them that they cannot testify because of their family lineage. So that is an objective thing that is not related directly to the case, but rather something that is an independent fact. So the Meir says, since me and my friend are giving testimony about the family of your witnesses. So I'm not talking about their reliability or anything else, just their family tree. And then if it's true that there's something wrong with the family tree of your witnesses, well then indirectly, they also will be disqualified from testifying. But I'm not testifying directly about their ability to testify. It's only indirect, and therefore that's something that we can look into and test independently. And therefore, that type of testimony will be accepted. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. But Rabbanan, sabre sof sof nogeh be'edutohu. No, in the end, that's still called that I'm connected to the court case, and I stand to gain, and therefore, me and my friend cannot be believed to testify, not even about the family lineage of your witnesses. And so, therefore, that's the subject of the machloket, and that explains why, according to the Bei Meir, it's possible to disqualify witnesses. It's not the same as an expert judge. An expert judge, I cannot disqualify. But if I'm testifying simply about the family lineage of your witnesses, that is something that I can testify about. Ki ata Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan machloket b'shnei kitei edim. And now we have a third interpretation of this section of our Mishnah from Rav Dimi. When he came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he quoted in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that the machloket between Rabbi Meir and Chachamim is in a case where the first litigant, the one who's bringing witnesses, says, listen, I have two sets of witnesses that say that you owe me $100. I don't have only one set of witnesses. The Rabbi Meir sabar sarich levarer, v'Rabbanan sabre en sarich levarer. Rabbi Meir says, in general, if one of the litigants comes in and says, I have two sets of witnesses, then it's incumbent upon the Bet Din to bring both sets of witnesses in and question them. Now, even though the first litigant really only needs one set of witnesses, and he can win the case based on one set of witnesses. And so you might say, and that's what Rabbanan say. Rabbanan say that even if you said you have two sets of witnesses, if you bring in the first one and they're accepted, then you don't have to bring in the second one. We have enough. Whereas Rabbi Meir says, no, if you claim that you have two sets of witnesses, then you have to bring both of them in, and we have to process both of them. So, according to Rabbi Meir, since this is a case where you said, I have two sets of witnesses, I'm the other litigant, I say, this first set of witnesses that you have here, I disqualify them. I don't like them. I'm allowed to do that. You know why? Because it won't affect the case. You have to bring the other set of witnesses into court anyway. And since you have another set of witnesses, so then you'll win the case based on those. That's where the Rabbi Meir says, I can disqualify your witnesses. But if you have only one set of witnesses, then I cannot. Now, Rabbanan say that even if you say, I have two sets of witnesses, you don't have to bring in the second one. Maybe you don't have the second one. Maybe you're bluffing, whatever. So since you don't have to bring in the second one, if I come and say, I don't like this first set of witnesses, maybe you don't really have another one. Or maybe you find it difficult to bring them in. Maybe they do exist, but they're not around. And therefore, you might lose the case if I disqualify the witnesses. And that's why Rabbi Meir says, I cannot disqualify the witnesses unless I have a real claim that there's something wrong with them. However, if the aval bekat achat ibra kol en yacholin en yachol lefoslan, if you claim to only have one set of witnesses, then everybody would agree, even to be Meir, then I cannot disqualify them. I'm an interested party. I can't just disqualify your witnesses when I would stand to gain. Amru lefanav Rav Ameh veRav Aseh. So now Rav Dimi is continuing his report, and he said, when Rabbi Yochanan taught that, Rav Ameh and Rav Aseh asked the following question. En sham ela achat kat achat mahu. What if there's only one set of witnesses? Now we ask about that. En sham kat ela kat achat v'hamat abal bekat achat ibra kol en yachol lefoslan. Why are you asking about if there's only one set of witnesses? Rabbi Yochanan said explicitly, if there's only one set of witnesses, then everybody agrees that I cannot disqualify them. So we already know what the answer to that is. Ela nimset kachenia kerubin o pesulin mahu. No, what they meant to ask, they just didn't clarify it, is what if you claimed you have two sets of witnesses? I disqualify one of them. Okay, fine, you have another one. What if the other one comes in and it turns out that that second one are relatives, or they're disqualified, they're gamblers. And now what? The second one are disqualified, and I already said I have an objection. I don't like the first witnesses. So now you're going to be left with nothing. So what do we do in that case? That was the question. And Rabbi Yochanan answered them, Amar lehen kevara'idu edim harishonim. Says, no, the first pair of witnesses already testified, meaning me. I already said that I don't like your witnesses. And since they already were thrown out, Then the second set of witnesses turns out that they were no good. Oh well, then you lost your case. What could you do? Some say the same answer, but not that Rabbi Yochanan said it. Instead, Rav Ashi said it at some later time in the later generation, and it says already the first witnesses came, and they were just, meaning I came and I said I don't like your witnesses, and so we threw them out so that they're already gone. And now we were relying on the fact that you had a second set of witnesses according to the Meir, but turns out that they were no good. Well, too bad, and then you lost the case. Now that we've established that the Meir thinks sarich levarer, that whatever proofs one claims, you have to bring them into court, and Chamim say en sarich levarer, you can claim I have all this many witnesses, but you only have to bring in 2 witnesses, and sufficient to win the case. And even if you claim you have others, you don't have to bring them in. So let's try to line up the machloket between Rabbi Meir and Chachamim with the machloket between Rabbi and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel as follows. The Tanya: Haba lidon bishtar ubahazaka nidon bishtar dibre Rabbi. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer nidon behazaka. Someone comes to court and says, I own this house and I have 2 forms of proof. Number 1, I have a deed of sale that says I bought the house from you. And second, I also have a chazakah. I can bring witnesses that I've been living here for 3 years and undisturbed. Nobody objected to it. And I have a claim that I bought it. But he doesn't have to prove that he bought it. He could just say, I bought it from you and I've been living here for 3 years. So now he claims to have 2 proofs. And the B says that which one do we use? We use the shtar. You don't have to bring in the chazakah, just bring in the shtar. Which means that you don't have to bring both. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer nidon b'chazakah. Rashbag says, no, just bring in the chazakah, and you don't have to bring in the deed. Now that's the machloket. When we analyze that, we said the follows: V'avinan ba b'chazakah v'lo b'shtar ela ema af b'chazakah. And when we analyze this parata, we asked about Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Does he really mean that you can just bring the chazakah, but you cannot bring the deed? What if I want to bring the deed? So we explained, no, that what he means is you can use the deed. He agrees with the B. If you want to bring the deed in, that's all you need. You don't have to bring proof of the chazakah. Or if you want, you could bring the chazakah only, and you could leave the deed at home, and you don't have to bring it in. So, what's at the essence of that machloket? At the essence is whether you have to substantiate all the claims that you have. According to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, he says you could bring chazakah or the deed, one or the other. And even though he says, I have a deed, you don't have to bring it in. If you bring proof of the chazakah, that's sufficient. Or one or the other. So that means en sarich levarer. Whereas, according to the B, if you said that you have a deed at home, then you have to bring it in. This is a substantive item that you claim that you had, then you have to bring it in. And so Rabbi says, sarich levarer. And so that way we can line up the machloket and say that Rabbi and Rabbi Meir both say sarich levarer, whereas Rashbag and Chachamim say en sarich levarer. So should we line these up? And we say la, not necessarily. Alibad Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel kule alma la pelige. For sure, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says en sarich levarer. And everybody would agree with that. And so that would line up with Chachamim and certainly would not be in agreement with Rabbi Meir. That's for sure true. Ki peligi alibad Rabbi. However, both Rabbi Meir and Chachamim can be in agreement with Rabbi, and there would be 2 interpretations of how to apply what Rabbi said. Rabbi Meir ki Rabbi v'Rabbanan amre lach עד כאן לא קמה רבי התם אלא בחזקה, דמכוח שתרה כעתה. אבל אחר דהני עדים לא מכוח עדים אחרים כעתו, אפילו רבי מודה דאין צריך לברר. So certainly Rabbi Meir can say, I follow Rabbi says צריך לברר, I also say צריך לברר. That would be the easy one to line up. But Rabbanan, they can say, you know what? Rabbi would agree with us. We would agree with Rabbi regarding the case that Rabbi said. And even Rabbi would agree in our case. The cases are different. Why? Rabbi only applied what he said there where he's coming to claim a chazakah. You're coming to claim a chazakah, you have to bring your shtar in also. Why? Because your claim of the chazakah doesn't stand by itself. A chazakah means I was here for 3 years and nobody objected. Plus, I have to explain a way that I got it legitimately. I cannot just say, I squatted here for 3 years, so leave me alone. You have to say, I was here for 3 years and nobody bothered me, and you gave it to me as a gift. Or, and you sold it to me. You have to explain how once upon a time it belonged to someone else, and how you got it. So therefore, since the chazakah relies on what it says in the shtar, that's why the B says that you have to do both. Really, the B says in general, en tzarich levarer. As follows, in the case that Rabbi Meir and Chachamim are talking about, where one of the litigants says, I have 2 sets of witnesses. The 2 sets of witnesses are not dependent on each other. If one turns out to be good witnesses, the other ones don't matter at all. So they're completely independent. In that case, even the B would agree, and tzarich levarer, that it's enough to bring just one set of witnesses. So you see that the B, according to the Banan, they can explain that the machloket between the Rabbi and Rabban Shimon Gamliel that is independent of tzarich levarer. Both of them agree that en tzarich levarer, and Rabbi would agree that when there's 2 sets of witnesses, you don't have to bring in both of them. If one's good, then you're good, and we don't have to bring the other one in. The only reason why Rabbi says in this case of chazakah and shtar that you have to bring the shtar in is because the chazakah is dependent on the shtar. Not that you actually need a shtar for chazakah, but the chazakah is dependent on the claim that you bought it and once upon a time had a shtar, but just that you lost it. So since it's dependent on the shtar, that's what Rabbi says you have to bring in the shtar. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.